Sweden's share of the world's total climate impact is 0.15%. If you include stuff that Swedes don't really make, but that we use, I guess this is probably not made in Sweden, and this is maybe Chinese. So somebody else made it, it's on their carbon budget, but it's really our fault. Then it adds up to something like 0.3%. In short, it's so little, so that if Sweden theoretically were to reduce our emissions to 0 right now, without telling anyone, we just shut off all the factories, shut off all these passenger cars that you talked about, and we breathe in, and then we don't breathe out again, nobody would notice. All those carbon dioxide equivalent indicators around the world, they can't even spot the difference. That's how tiny Sweden is. So when there's 8 parties in the Swedish parliament, one is xenophobic, they're not very interested in these kind of issues. All the other 7 parties, they decided together that they wanted to design a climate law for Sweden. And they made the same analysis that we just made. How much is it? 0.15%. And then they thought, okay, so then that doesn't really matter what we do now, does it? And then they thought, okay, so the only way we can become relevant in Sweden is if what we do is so inspiring so that people come to Gasklockorna in Gävle and other places around in Sweden and say, well, we want to learn from Sweden. We want to see what you're doing with city planning. We want to see what you're doing with renewable fuels. We want to see how you increase shared mobility. We want to bring that home. In short, the 7 parties in parliament agreed to the world's toughest climate targets. A 70% emissions reduction 2010 to 2030 in the transport sector. That's how we created a 2030 Secretariat, because we said we want to make sure this happens. And they said, Sweden, the only way we can become relevant is if we're the global help desk to call. This is Sweden, how can I help you? Or the permanent exhibition to visit. Sweden as a whole and cities like Gävle. Places that we want to visit. So, we said minus 70% to 2030, 7 out of the 8 parties agree. And to the right, you see a coalition of the willing. There should really be more logos there because it keeps adding up. Companies, organizations, including Compass, which we're proud to have as a member with the Podcar transition as part of reaching those targets. And it's just growing because more and more feel that this is the way for us to make a difference. And we want to make a difference. I'm going to teach you just 3 words in Swedish. We want to make a difference within the transport sector by working with bilen, bränslet och beteendet. Now the bilen, that's the vehicle. Bilen, we're getting somewhere there. You mentioned technological advancement. We see the electric cars starting to show up. Our neighbors Norway show that already now 50% of new car sales can be electric. That's not Sweden, it's Norway, but it's our neighbors, so we take part of the credit. And with the fuel as well, if you go in Sweden and you fill up your car with diesel, you go to Preem, for instance, then a lot of that is still fossil, but 20%, and in many places even 50, or in some places even 100% of that diesel is made from forestry waste. Swedish renewable forestry waste turned into diesel. The same old diesel car, but a 90% CO2 emissions reduction because we use forestry waste. So with bilen and bränslet, we're getting somewhere. With beteendet, the behavioral change, not much has happened. Let me show you one example. So this is what Sweden is famous for. Actually, Gävle is the place where we used to make the most cars in Sweden because we made Ahlgrens bilar until a few years ago. A Swedish candy shaped like a car. But they moved that production to, I believe, Czechia or Hungary. Out of the country. Volvo is also moving out of the country, but Volvo is still top of mind when you talk about Sweden. So, this is Sweden's best-selling car in the 70s. A large Volvo estate. This is Sweden's best-selling car in the 80s. A large Volvo estate. This is Sweden's best-selling car in the 90s. A large Volvo estate. This is Sweden's best-selling car in the 0s. A large Volvo estate. And this is Sweden's best-selling car right now. A large Volvo estate. So what has happened with behavior? Not much. We're still 1.4. I'll struggle to see that 0.4 person, but we're 1.4 persons on average in a car that on average weighs 1.5 tons. So more than 100 kilos of cars per kilo, more than 10 kilos of a car per kilo of person. The opposite, the inversion of a bike, where you weigh 10 times more than the bike, the car weighs 10 times more than what you transport in. And it's still 5 meters long, 2 meters wide, takes up a lot of space, and take a huge chunk out of money out of the Swedish pocket because these are expensive cars. So with behavioral change, not much has happened. And we see that it's been difficult to move ahead because there's a there's a doubling target for public transport. Now, they're lucky within the public transport sector because it doesn't really have a final year when the share of total transport is going to be doubled, and it's only increasing by 1.6% per decade, if I'm right by now. We also see the usual trouble with public transport, the low flexibility. The same bus has to be used when there's no one, and when space is not enough. And actually, these differences grow because more and more of us are using public transport when we commute, but not for all the other kinds of activities. So these difficulties in using public transport efficiently just keeps getting worse. We see the same trouble when we come to goods. We see that very many companies have their stock, the warehouses by now on wheels. It's just in time. You order something today, you want to have it this afternoon or tomorrow morning at the latest. I order food delivered to my door. I want it at 7. I don't want it at 7:30. You want it at 7:30. You don't want it at 7 sharp. So there's going to be 2 different trucks coming and they're all empty. You knock on a truck and ask, can I see what's in there? And you see there's not much. Usually there's not much because just in time transport is so cheap, and that's why the roads are so filled with trucks, half empty, most of them. Then we had a nice introduction about self-driving, or at least self-parking cars that are getting there already. I want to challenge the concept of how great self-driving cars are a little bit, because that leads me towards today's discussion. When I see a self-driving car, this is Volvo's, this product is being probably abandoned. If you look at this car, it's self-driving. Yeah, but it's still a huge Volvo, costing a lot of money, taking up 5 times 2 meters, weighing 2 tons, and it's not an electric car. You know, many people they make an equivalence between self-driving and electric. No, this is a fossil-powered car. It runs, I think, a few kilometers in electricity, and then it's petrol or diesel. And also, when I was the only Swede at the BMW think tank the other month in Munich. And then the BMW people said, we see self-driving cars as the main driver for selling cars to individuals in the future. A lot of us will think, well, self-driving cars, that's great because we can share cars. There's even great research saying that the 10 of us here can share 1 car. We can reduce the amount needed of cars by 90%. That's true, but if the auto industry gets their way, it's not going to happen because they're going to see this as a huge selling argument. You can have your individual car, you can lean back and do your work. Why would you bother taking public transport when you can sit in your nice Volvo, watch a movie, do your work or sleep? So, unless we regulate this, there's going to be a lot more cars, not less, thanks to self-driving cars. There's going to be more emissions because there's nothing saying these are going to be electric. And every other car in the street is going to have 0, not 1.5, but 0 persons in it. Because it was picking up your kids, now it's going to pick up me. And in between, it's driving by itself. Or parking in Stockholm, it's €5 an hour. Why would I want to waste €5 an hour when I can just tell the car to drive around until my meeting is over? So I really want to challenge the concept of self-driving cars. It can be great, but it will only be great if we regulate it. I also want to challenge the concept of multimodality. We are part of the multimodality. At the Podcar circuit, we often say, well, we're the last mileage, and we are great in combining different modes of transport. Yes, that's true. And you see here how little space the bikers take compared to the cars or compared to the bus. The bus, incidentally, takes the least place. But multimodality often means that you need all of those. So that takes the most space possible. The cars are still going to be there, the bikes are still going to be there, and the bus is going to be there as well. And if we say, well, the last mile, we're going to have the podcar, then throw in a podcar there as well, and you will see that what we say about how we can really reduce the amount of space needed for transport is true, but it's only true if we regulate it well. And then finally, and I totally concur with the vice mayor of Gävle, who just said that there needs to be some kind of attractiveness in this. We know, and I'm an ex-politician myself, we know that unless it's fun, it's not going to happen. That's true for politicians. That's why electric cars are now picking up. That's also true on a household level. We strongly believe that we're rational individuals. But let's think about our most important choices in life. Whom you chose to partner with. Your husband, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend. Was that a rational choice? Does it make economic sense? We never even think about that. That's not the way we reason. And where we live, the car we drive, possibly even the workplace we're at, none of those are really rational choices. The rational choices are at the small level where it doesn't really matter. We make a rational choice when we buy toothpaste. Okay, this is cheaper, I'll go for that one. This is healthier, I'll take that one. But in all the big decisions of life, we're really not rational. There's a fun factor needed. This is a picture of the first time people try a Tesla. And of course, many of us want to rationalize decisions afterwards, but the fun factor is something that we need to factor in. And when I've, around the world, been trying out the Podcars, I'm among friends here, right? The doors are closed. I haven't had much fun. Not much. I was in France with the Minister of Infrastructure. The Podcar was slower than the people walking outside, so they walked past me. And then, believe it or not, even though it's very slow, it can still brake very hard. So when it did brake very hard for Pigeon in front of us, we all fell, and the minister tried to hide his bruise from the photographers. And of course, it was just clad in hard plastic, solid hard plastic inside, with seating for 4 persons, and the rest of us had to stand up. This one is a lot better, so I'm glad that you're showing this one. But I'm still thinking there's something that we need to do to fulfill your requirement as a politician, that this has to be attractive and fun, otherwise it's not going to win. And then we had the game changer. Monday morning, 3 a.m. Swedish time, I woke up, I had my alarm set 3 a.m. We had the IPCC report, 1.5 degree. What difference is there between 2 degrees and 1.5? A huge difference. 1.5 degree global warming, we can still live with. There's going to be troubles, but most of it is bearable, we can handle it. 2 degrees, starting to get very tricky, because if it gets 2 degrees warmer, it will probably also get 3, 4, 5, 6 degrees warmer, and then we're doomed. Because something between 1.5 and 2, or just over 2, that's where the permafrost in the Siberian areas starts melting. And then we get the huge methane leakages, and then there's a runaway global warming that becomes very hard to stop. So the IPCC says we can still stop this at 1.5 degrees. That's still doable, but it requires unprecedented action. If you follow Donald Trump on Twitter, he uses that word a lot, but he misspells it. This is the way you want to spell it. And the way you want to do it is that if you figure one of those lists with all kinds of things that you can do, it's now time to just cross all those boxes. We need electric cars. We need better public transport. We need behavioral change. We need podcast solution. We need smarter last mile solution. We need all of them. The choice, and I remember I've been a fan of Podcars for many years, and it's often been, well, should we do this or that, or maybe this is better? That time is now, at least since Monday, over. We should do this and that, and that, and that. Otherwise, we won't reach those targets. And those targets are for the next 10 to 15 years to do all of the above. So what I think I want to convey is to Sweden as a country, to Gävle as a city, and to all of us when we go home to our respective communities, that there is business in being first. Since the Paris Agreement, and even more so since Monday's 1.5 degree, we know that everybody wants to save this planet. Everybody wants to be part of the Paris Agreement. There's one country that is probably bowing out. They're still part of it, by the way, the US. And all the other countries are still in. And they're all trying to figure out, okay, so how do we become leaders in this? Sweden want to be a leader. We're not the only one. Many people see that if everybody wants to be there, there's more business in being a front runner than a laggard. And that's why what we're proposing is suddenly making business sense. Thank you so much.